it's almost like three kinds of trust that we're really exploring. It's like the trust with ourselves, the trust with creativity, like whatever you think of as source or God or the universe, whatever your word is for it, but that kind of unnameable force. And then the trust of this thing that is coming from you that I personally believe kind of has its own soul and energy, and it's not just you. And so I think to be engaged in any of those forms of trust, you really don't have to know much. Like it's just sort of about that yes. I think going back to the yes, that we're not waiting for a full, 10 bullet point plan and even a clear why. You don't even need to know the clear why, because the why, like you're saying, Anna, is somatic. I find the why is usually in the body before there's language.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. I'm so thrilled to share today's episode with someone who's had a really meaningful presence in my own journey, Liz Kimball. Liz and I met about 10 years ago in a coaching certification program, and I really looked up to her. She'd already been coaching for years, and she brought this grounded, wise, creative energy to everything she did. After the course ended, I got to work with her as a client, and it was a pretty magical experience for me. So reconnecting with her for this conversation felt like a full circle moment. Liz is a creativity catalyst and transformational coach for visionary creators. She's the founder of the Creative 15 and the Expansion Project Creative Development Lab. And her work is all about helping women and girls free their voices and bring their brave, creative work into the world without burning themselves out in the process. Her work has been featured on TEDx, Oprah.com, the Guggenheim, and at universities and institutions throughout the country. She's also a mother and, as she says, a nonlinear duck. More on that in the episode. In our conversation, we talked about the importance of having a safe, depressurized space for the creative process to unfold, something Liz creates so beautifully for her clients. As she put it, she needed a depressurized environment to hear the sound of me. And I think so many of us can relate to that. We also talked about her nonlinear path to coaching, how she started long before coaching was a buzzword, and how she's followed the quiet tugs of her inner voice, often before she could see the full picture. This one's for anyone who's feeling the call to create something, even if it doesn't all make sense quite yet. I hope you love it as much as I did. Liz, I am ecstatic to see you. I'm so happy to see you. It's been like a lifetime and yet like a minute since we last saw each other. And just for the listeners' context, you and I met in what was, for me, my very first introduction to coaching. It was a coaching certification program, but you were already an experienced coach. And then I was your client for a while. And those magical sessions we had together have stayed with me in such a vivid way, even though it was like years ago. So welcome. It's so great to see you.
It's such a delight to be here. They have also stayed with me. It's so interesting. Like two things are true. It feels like no time. And also we're talking years, people. I mean, this is like a long time now.
Seriously, years. It was the coaching certification program we did together was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So really just also celebrating the work you have birthed in that decade, Anna.
Thank you, Liz. Oh my gosh. I want to say same to you. And also, I mean, I look to you as a mentor. You've been developing this work over quite some time.
Yeah, I'm kind of part of the at this point, I feel like I'm sort of the old generation in the coaching because the field
Yeah.
is so rapidly growing.
It is.
I do sort of, I mean, I'm certainly not in the earliest phase of it, but I have been on ye old internet and coaching streets for, yeah, over a decade now.
Yeah, and really like pioneering stuff that like, sort of just saw you do. I was like, she's doing really cool things and I don't even really know, like I don't totally understand. And then I started learning about um coaching and group programs and all this stuff. So anyway, I'd love to get into it by asking you to share with our listeners, and I know I'm going to learn new stuff about you myself too. What is it that you do and who do you work with? Who is your work for?
So I think so much about curiosity. So I really kind of think my work all centers around a question and then a context. So I'll start with the question, and because it really informs like what I do and who I work with. But I think this question that I have been doggedly pursuing and will probably doggedly pursue until I'm, a centrarian in my hundreds is like, what is possible for us as a collective, as a human species, when every woman on the planet has full access to her creative voice, full access to her creative vision, and full access to her creative power? Like, what could we then do collectively? And my work focuses around women and non-binary people, but like we could also extend that out to anyone who has been historically under-supported by our culture. So that's like why I get up in the morning. And the context then that I'm sort of obsessed with is what then has to be true? Like, what needs to be kind of our inner context and our outer environmental context for that to happen and for each of us to kind of do this brave creative work of our lives? Because the cultural context, at least I grew up in, really is sort of depends on me not having full access to my creative vision, power, and voice. And so I think we don't yet know collectively enough about this context, even though like we're making strides. But um, that's sort of become my obsession. And it's all about context for me because we can't control the creative process and we can't control these gifts that come forth from us and what we're meant to bring forth. Like, I just bow at the altar of that exquisite, mysterious, miraculous process. But I'm really influenced by a woman named Anne Bogard, who's a theater director. And she just like early on, she taught me that we can't control results. We can only control the conditions in which they're possible. And like, so I'm just basically obsessed with like, how do we each sort of become really aware and knowledgeable about the conditions for us to birth this meaningful creative work of our lives? And then, I do this work through coaching. I have a private practice, and then also I lead a creative incubator for visionary creators in all fields. So I'm so about cross pollination. I do not like only working with certain industry crafts because I actually am much more interested about helping people kind of expand beyond the limits of a craft and really like sometimes they sort of need a little bit more freedom and space. So yeah, so I run this incubator, this development lab, and then and I coach, and that's currently the way I'm exploring this question in this context. But like, I also think that will keep evolving as well.
Yeah. I'm in love with the work that you do and how you talk about it. And it was interesting hearing you talk about like creating or like getting clear on what are the conditions that nurture growth, basically, if I'm interpreting that
Yeah.
right. And speaking about what you've created as a creative incubator. And just earlier today, I actually said I recorded a solo podcast episode earlier today, and I wound up switching topics. But what I originally was trying to record something on was this idea of a holding environment. Are you familiar with that phrase? It's apparently from the mid-century psychotherapist Donald Winnicott. I think I'm getting his name right. But anyway, it's just
I know Winnicott.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think his version of this idea was about child development and parenting, which we might wind up talking about in a bit, and how the parent's role is not to develop the child or not to get the child to develop, but rather to be a safe or relatively safe holding environment, a space that's safe enough for the child to unfold into.
I have goosebumps. This is it. It's amazing, really, like kind of, I think, what we need to do the work we're meant to be doing in the world and the work of our lives. It's actually so simple. Like, again, it sort of comes down to like space, safety, um, and kind of like support. Like when I'm talking about a context, these are the things I'm talking about. And they go against so many of the messages, I think, especially in creative fields we receive, because like, and I don't know if this relates to any of like your TV past, but it's like, I was told throughout my career, and I had a career as a performing artist for a decade before I did this work, like all the time I was getting this message, like, don't play it safe. Like, and people were trying to get you to kind of go to the edge of your creative life. But I feel like the way it's taught, it sort of makes us feel like the only way I'm going to get there is if I feel unsafe. And we know that we need safety to feel curious, and curiosity drives the whole creative process. So it was this kind of revelation, especially as I started working with women about like, and all these women were coming to me because they like didn't want to follow the rules exactly as their industry had been given it to them. So like filmmakers who wanted to make a film that wasn't following it's called Save the Cat. There's like a very specific narrative kind of structure that we're taught. And they were like, I want to be freer than that. And people were like, I don't want so many rules, but I need something. I need structure. And I love this idea of a holding environment because that's really it. It's like, actually, you need to be cared for.
Yes.
And you need space, which is radical in the culture that we live in, both, from digital life and from, the constant messaging of keeping you small and things like that. So I love that idea.
Yeah. And I love the way that you talk about it. And I feel pulled to go on so many tangents with that, but I want to come back to the listener and follow their curiosity as well as mine, really, which is about what is it that led you to this work? I know a little bit about your story, but there's lots I don't know. How did you get here?
It's so interesting to think about. I don't know if this relates to you, and I wonder if this relates to anybody listening. Like what I'm doing right now makes such kind of soul sense with who I know my sort of freest, youngest self to be. And simultaneously, she had no understanding that this even existed. And I think our kids are going to say that, like it's just the way the world is developing. But I think of the chapter that I'm doing right now. When you ask that question to me, I really think about this. Okay, so my first job out of college was my first day job. So I was in New York to be a performer, and that was sort of like the path that I was on. And I got to New York from Chicago and had an agent, and like sort of had this path, but like I had to figure out how to make money between shows. And so I started teaching
And
ballet.
you were doing like theater?
Yeah,
acting?
theater.
Was it musical or dance related or?
Yeah, so I was a trained ballet dancer. That was like kind of my childhood. And then late in my high school years, I realized like this is sort of like every life decision for me. I don't know why I'm making it, but it feels like it's so intuitive and it makes so much sense kind of to my inner being, but it doesn't make sense with the life I've created so far. It's why I feel like my journey is so nonlinear. So I
Yeah.
was leading up to being a ballet dancer and I just sort of had this knowing like this is not the path. And now that I know that expressing myself through like voice and is such a big part of my life, makes so much sense that I made that. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, I don't think I want to be a ballet dancer. Um, and so I went into theater, not necessarily with it as like this huge passion, but just like I was like curious about something. There was like a kind of expression that I wanted to explore. And so I was just on a track and I moved to New York and I started, but made sense for me to pursue a career in the musical theater because I had all this dance background.
Yeah.
But I needed a job, and so I got a job teaching ballet to young, to like 4 through 6 year olds.
Oh, wow.
And it's still like one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
And I lived in New York and I would take the train every weekend to Connecticut. And one fall semester, I had 2 students that changed my life. And I really think they are like, and if they're, one day maybe I'll connect with them again. Like if you're listening, you are such a part of this journey because so I had this student named Ava and I had never met someone whose enthusiasm was so like so centered in her life. And like this is true for most 4-year-olds and then times that by 100. Like this child would walk into class and she would be like, this is the class where we make magic in every moment. And she would raise her hand during class and she would be like, I just want you to know that I'm having such a good time right now. And it was just, she was sent to me by some magical force because I realized when I met Ava that I was so kind of not connected to my own deepest enthusiasm and spark and just like letting it lead my life.
Yeah.
And she showed me like you can live like this. It is possible.
Ooh. I keep getting chills. I don't know if you like see my body is like shaking. It's crazy. Like we feel that energy when we come into contact with that connection to the spark, to the life energy, to like whatever you want to call it. Like we might not know how to put it into words, but we feel it.
I feel it too in my body. And I think when we encounter someone like Ava, like when we have the gift, I mean, it truly was she had a divine, she was so connected to her divinity. And that's, like enthusiasm is I love the root word of enthusiasm because it means connected to God and whatever your word is for it. I'm not talking in a religious context, but in that sort of awesome, bigger than language context. And when we encounter someone like her, we're like, oh my God, that is in me too.
Yeah.
It gets buried. So here's the next person that I encountered. So Stella.
Ooh, I keep feeling it. It's like we're like tuning forks. And when we feel that connection to the spark, to the source in someone else, and like I'm feeling it from you as you're connecting into your experience of it, and it's like vibrating something in me. It's really so interesting.
I feel that too. And I also love that you are so open to that and you are sensing that in this moment. I feel honored that you're sharing that. So there's Stella. And Stella, a really different vibe, a little bit older, like 5. And she'd walk into class with a list of 100 questions from the last class. And just like her curiosity was kind of like this fountain that was just like erupting all of the time. And it was just more curiosity than I think I had ever had as a teacher. But it was so exciting, and she was like always at the front of the line and just like so driven by knowledge and understanding. And so this was sort of how Stella would show up. And then one week Stella shows up and she didn't stand at her usual spot in the bar. She didn't raise her hand once during class.
Oh.
And I was like, what is going on with Stella? And I checked in and there was like I couldn't quite figure it out. And I was like, maybe it was just like an off week. She comes back the next week, no questions.
Oh.
She comes back the next week, no questions.
Oh.
And so the reason why Stella and Ava are connected to me is because I started to get at that time to sort of like something happened to Stella in that week.
Mm.
And I don't know what it was, but my sense of it is that there was some kind of cultural memo somewhere that your curiosity is too big.
Yeah.
And that the way you want to engage with the world is too much. And since then, since Ava and Stella, and I'm sure before that, not really knowing it, but because I realized I had quieted that in myself too.
Yeah.
And since then, I have been very interested in what happens to that part of ourself that we think is too much. How do we reclaim it?
Yeah.
And how do we bring back that spark, that kind of just like oozing enthusiasm that is within all of us?
I'm so floored by this story that you're telling and the way that you're telling it. And I just love your storytelling style. I really connect to the way you tell story. And that it's just such a powerful kind of story archetype for something that we all experience and that we all know on some kind of like instinctual level. Like we all do know, even if we haven't felt it for a long time, we know that feeling of just being in awe, in curiosity, in connection with life. And we want it, like we want it back. Even if we've kind of gotten to a point where we've convinced ourselves it wasn't real or that we don't have access to it, like there's that longing for it. And the world needs more champions of that, like you.
It's what I was put here to do. I've had to work through all of my own narratives. To me, reclaiming my enthusiasm is this. And I really do have these two. I mean, they were, like angels sent into my life to sort of help me see something, see a pattern. And I didn't immediately in that moment then be like, here's how I'm going to work toward this. In the way that our paths unfold, like it unlocked something. And it led me, to many other points. But I think jump forward several years and I went to grad school and then started my, very surprising path in the field, in the path in the coaching field. And I was originally working with artists and sort of helping them with business skills. That was kind of like my first job in a coaching company. And I started to notice this pattern. It was artists and creatives. And this was when like digital culture was really growing. So now like it's podcast hosts and course creators and coaches like in this group too.
Yeah.
And people were really connected to their, they had these big creative visions, but I mean, it sounds so simple, but like they were having a lot of trouble really actually putting the time into the thing that they really wanted to be doing. It's like this question in coaching. It's like, what? Huh? We really want this thing. Why are we not?
Yes. I think so many people listening are going to be like, that's what I'm dealing with.
And by the way, my hand is raised. Okay. So like, this is not me having figured this all out. I am alongside of us in this question of like, and the way the coaching field often likes to answer this is, well, you need to be more productive and you need to like, have an accountability plan. And I'm not saying those things don't work, but I think it's often answered through productivity culture.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, this isn't working for my clients. Like,
that stuff doesn't work for me. Even that, like, and power to the people that works for. Like, if it works, and that's great.
Yes.
For me personally, like on a nervous system level, when I hear the words productivity, but even more so accountability, for some reason, it's that word. Like, I've been in programs where they're like, okay, find an accountability buddy. And I'm like,
run for the hills.
Yeah. Because I'm just that my nervous system's like, I'm in trouble.
And you're setting up that this is so related to the theme of your podcast, this self-trust thing, because it's like you're setting up this idea that someone else holds the power there. In some ways, right? Like saying I need to be accountable. It's why I tell every client, I am not here for accountability.
Yeah.
It's my biggest intention is for you to create this relationship with your creativity. And that's the relationship that I'm just here to hold sacred with you. Don't hire me for accountability. First of all, like I'm not your gal. I'm not that good at it.
And there are plenty of people who will do that if that's what you seek.
Yeah. So I started to see this, and it sounds like, you've seen this in your practice too. And so that's when I got really curious about like, okay, it's not actually about like more goals necessarily or more kind of productivity structures. What's keeping you when you do write on your calendar, I'm going to work on the book on that morning? Then why am I not showing up for that hour that I already, because you're a smart person, you read about it, productivity, and you already blocked it off on your calendar. You don't need me to tell you that. What did you learn that is keeping you from there? And what do we need to unbelong to? What kind of cultural myths do we need to unbelong to so that we can hang out in the space of your vision and in the space of the thing that's waking you up at night and whispering to you? We don't have to know why it is, but it just is. And
I love that so much. And I'm just like really connecting it with it, not just on a philosophical level and on a like coaching philosophy level, but in just like very much real time. As I mentioned, one of the things I happened to do earlier today was record a solo episode. And the fear stuff always comes up when I'm recording a solo episode. It's not the same when I'm interviewing. Like that just feels so easy and I can dive right in. But when I'm creating, when I sit down to write, when I sit down to record, all the tentacles come up that are trying to pull me away from that, and dialoguing with those tentacles is like the necessary entry point.
I love that. Do you enter it through the dialogue?
I do. For me, like that's the way to enter it, actually.
Well, that relates to another thing I'm obsessed with, which is like I think of it as like our personal creative room. And whatever that means for you. I mean, it's not necessarily your physical space, because it's also just sort of this interior space, this room of where you go to write the book or to birth the podcast or to just like follow that idea or to think about your parenting. So I really look at creative life as it's not about a particular craft or a particular title. It is about sort of this relationship with creativity and you following on the nudges that are coming to you. So anyways, we have this creative room, and it wasn't until like just when I was meeting you, but even beyond then, that I even understood that my creative room was so hijacked by the sort of perfection, the conglomeration. It's a conglomeration, because that's why Tentacles is so good, of like perfectionism, that sort of harsh, critical, I call it the tiny terrorist, but whatever, we each have a name for it, that kind of like conglomeration of criticism, judgment, and doubt. My room was so hijacked, I couldn't even hear. I didn't even know I had a creative voice. And I didn't even realize it. Like I was a professional. I was like working in the industry. And I was so, I didn't even have the freedom or the kind of depressurized environment to hear the sound of me, and to hear the sound of my truth. And that has really been such a dedication and a devotion of my own life. And it's, I've developed a lot of ways to work with it. I'm constantly working with it. And then once I became a mother, I sort of went back to square one again. And so, it's one of my life's passions, is helping us figure out how do we create the creative room, a benevolent creative room.
so love the way you just phrased that I wrote it down. A depressurized environment to hear the sound of me. And I kind of want to pause with that for a moment because, I think that to me, that connects so much to like my experience, my growth journey as a coach. But I think that this applies to anyone in any profession, in any life experience, that all of that like perfectionism and pressure culture and all that stuff that you're naming leads to us thinking like, I got to be more, I got to do more, I got to this, that, and the other. And when I started coaching, it's like, I need to have more frameworks and more online courses and more tools and like things to just like spew at these clients. And the longer that I do it, the clearer and clearer it is to me that what people are coming to me for, and it's also what I come to my mentors for, like you, is a depressurized environment where I can hear the sound of me. So simple, as you said. And so, but yet so hard to find. We really have to seek these out and create them.
And the pressure shows up in 1,000 different costumes.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes we hear that and we're like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm not like putting pressure on myself.
Oh, yeah.
But like you're saying, right, the pressure to do more or the pressure, a huge pressure in any creative work is to know the answer before you've discovered it, to kind of have certainty in a process when you are not in the place in the process where you're supposed to be feeling certainty, where like you're supposed to be living in the questions. And then the pressure kicks in, the pace of the internet kicks in and is like, why haven't you figured this out yet? And it feels so simple, like you're saying, but I really think of my job is like, how do I help you create that room that where we take the pressure out of the room? Because you're going to do everything else exactly as the way you are meant to. But the room is a major block, and we gotta get you in a room of expansion, or else it just becomes. What I have found is we start, especially as we move forward, in years, is it's not even worth it. We're like, why do I even want to go work on that thing or pursue that idea? Because when I get there, the room tone is so cruel. It's not worth it.
Yeah. I am dying to like follow this thread back into your story of how you got to where you are now. Because, and I'll just share like my view of your journey as something that I think it, my vision of your journey is something that so many people want, which is, you've walked a path toward really fulfilling alignment, I think, with your unique Liz expression of, who you are as a human being. You have found a way of making that into your life's work and your life, period. Um, and that is, I think it's something that so many of us want and crave, but as we're talking about, there's so much fear that comes in to stifle that. And you in particular, because of when you began your coaching career, it was before it was, it's quite a bit more mainstream now. But I don't think there were that many, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there were that many models for what you were doing. I had never seen anyone doing what you were doing when I met you.
I agree. I didn't have any models. I mean, I started off in a coaching company and I had a wonderful mentor there. I think what resonates with me about what you're saying, it has taken me 4 decades to really own and stand honorably beside my nonlinear path. And not only not feel shame about it, but be like, this is me. This if I wasn't on this nonlinear path, I wouldn't actually have been following my own truth. So when I hear you reflect that back to me, I feel like one of the common the golden thread in this path is like I had to kind of give up that I was going to have to make sense. Like if I made sense, I would have there's all these paths. I would have been a professional ballet dancer, or I would have kept teaching business skills to artists. Plenty of people said to me, you could take that, teach everybody that. You can build an empire around that, or whatever, however people want to vision with you. And I was like, but what if I could center the creative process? And I just kept saying, like, but what if, like, what if I could? Is that something I could, people actually like need support with and want to kind of get in community around? And I just kept testing and experimenting and being like, well, but what about this? Because it just kept getting truer and truer. And then you have these things where you're like, I don't want somebody else is teaching business skills to artists and they're much better at it than me. And that was never, that kind of got me here, but that wasn't, I don't know. I just keep following the truth and I keep waiting for somebody to be like, you can't do this. But here's what I've learned. I feel like so many of the people that I work with come and are like, how do I hold these multitudes within me? Like, how do I make sense of this part of me and this part of me, and that I love this and that I love this? And is it even possible to love all these things and to sort of have these various parts of me that have been expressed professionally? And I think one of the biggest permissions we can give ourselves is like, if you own it, then yes, like as if we can say that actually all of this makes sense to me, it might not make linear sense in the way we were taught to have a career in the 1980s for me.
You know what I would love to ask you? So again, like going back to my reflection, my vision of your path and where you are now, and you were saying it's taken you 4 decades to really stand beside your own non-linear path, and you are in that place of standing beside it. And I'd love to hear, like, what does it feel like to be at that place? Like the real full picture of it, which I'm guessing includes, feelings that feel really great and feelings that feel really messy and all of the above. I think it's so helpful for folks who are, listening to podcasts like this conversation and looking for visions of what their path might possibly look like, and like what is the point of it? Where might they be going? I'd love to hear you're going and you continue to keep going and your path will continue to unfold. But from where you are now, like, what does it feel like for you to have created this life and this work that wasn't following someone else's path, but that it was really coming further and further into alignment with you?
Okay, so I'm not super good at spaces and design. I want to be. This is like an emerging thing for me. I would love to be. So when you're in my house, I think it's not like I would walk up to every piece of furniture and be like, yes, that's me. Yes, that's me. I'm not there yet in design. But if I were, that is sort of what my professional life feels like at this time, and sort of my full life really is like, I feel like I pick up sort of every part of it and say, yep, that's true to me. Yep, this over here is true to me. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. It means my growth probably hasn't tracked in the way, all the coaching programs that I bought, all the like how to grow your coaching business programs I bought that I never followed, would tell you to do it. But the thing that feels like such a gift is that every kind of piece of this tapestry that I look at feels like the truth.
Yeah. How do you get there? And I'll make that question a little bit more granular. And just like tying it into, yeah, the title of this podcast, which is How to Trust Yourself, because that, like what you just described, is really a journey of self-trust. Like all the courses were saying to do this, that, and the other, but you just kept following what felt true to you. And I'm curious, like what, I don't know, maybe what are some of the tangible practices, concepts, tools that you've used to help yourself continue to follow that path of what's true to me? And maybe like, yeah, what are some of the things that you use when working with clients to help them along that path?
I love practical tools because I think especially if we're like, so I would identify as somebody who loves a structure. I actually love a rule. I just don't really want to follow anybody else's rules. But I love the way I've got Virgo in my sixth house. Like I love some structure.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that something I think so many of us are hungry for, especially if we contextualize, for many of us, it's like we have our professional paths have been existing inside of a world that changed dramatically. Like the landscape changed so much as we have all been building our careers and figuring out sort of like what are the tools. Okay, if we're not going to follow that like step-by-step linear path that makes us feel like we're dying a slow death, what can we use? Okay, so like I have really found just like this idea of a project, like just sort of this idea of like getting clear because we need to have a focus and kind of what are these like containers? We just need sort of to find containers. So this idea that like I don't have to know the whole thing. I don't have to know sort of where this is going to lead and this is going to lead and this is going to lead to this. But can I give myself the container of a project for whatever the next thing is? And I really work with clients in this way and work with myself in this way. And it seems to help us figure out like that sweet spot between flexibility and structure, where you're like, how do I have enough of a container to give me the space to do the thing, but not that feels like oppressive and sort of like overly structured? So I would say projects are just like my favorite. My favorite creative container, but maybe other people figure out creative containers that work for them. But I think this has helped for people who express in multiple ways. Like you want to have a podcast and you're also building, a body of kind of thought leadership through writing. And you're also, maybe you're like speaking on stages or, I'm just like taking an example.
Mm.
It feels so overwhelming. Like it feels like, and how can I possibly pursue all of this in this one, in this one day where I'm also have a full client, all the things. And so I like to kind of go one project at a time in this really humble way, especially if you're a big visionary, because it can be hard to find that like what's going to, and I'm like I have so many visions, but what's going to help me take kind of humbly take a piece of what I see in my imagination and give me that container to really start experimenting in real time. Because it's always humble, because then the vision kind of doesn't stay so beautiful and in your imagined mind. And you have to be like, let's get on our feet. And experimentation, I would say, is the other just like central practice of my life. And I want to experiment more as I grow my body of work, not less.
I love how you are describing a project, like, and a project, yeah, it could be writing a song, developing a performance piece. It could be coming up with a recipe. I mean, it could be anything, right?
Anything. But
And
bringing in clients for a cohort, you could think of it like anything. It's just a little
yeah,
like
it could
gives you
be
just a little parameters.
it could be organizing one of the rooms in your house. I mean, it could be anything. And the way I'm hearing you talk about it is like project as holding environment, project
Mm.
as container for growth, which I think is such a, like when I hear a project described that way, I feel curious and and excited to enter the project to see what will happen versus like that, idea I think we're all more familiar with, which is project as like goal, output, product.
Right. We like see the project management Gantt chart in our mind, and then we're like, oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, pressure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love project as holding container. And as with everything, I'm like, rename it if the name doesn't, have resonance for you. But I think that it is. So I'm sure, this comes up for you, Anna, is like overwhelm is this thing where, so we're working with pressure. And then another kind of one of the tentacles is the overwhelm
Yeah.
that keeps us in kind of holding back and waiting on the things. And so what are these sort of gentle ways we can enter the space so that we can kind of reduce some of that overwhelm? And that's for me, projects. And then I'm like, it's like keep the vision big and we make underwhelming commitments.
I love that.
This is why
I
I'm a
love
fan of
that.
15 minutes a day, like 15 minutes of creative practice or time on, anything, but just like what's the sort of smallest, gentlest way in? Because nobody needs more things to feel bad about not showing up for. Like how we could end that now. That energy takes up it's such a drain on us. And we all have, I know, I mean, maybe someone listening relates to this. It's like that thing that you really care about, but then you set some kind of a commitment and you didn't show up for it. And then you feel badly.
I don't know why, but I'm kind of like having this thought, and it's making me laugh that I vibe so much with the way that you approach things. And in my mind, I think it's very opposite of like Tony Robbins' version of coaching, which is all about what you were talking about earlier, like don't play small, like push yourself over the basically like dive off a cliff and you'll learn how to fly while you're diving. But for a lot of people that just like shuts us down.
The metaphor of birth has been very helpful for me. And even before I birthed children in my body, there's a very famous book on creativity about, the war of art. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that we get this sort of message that like the thing, we're supposed to be in battle against the thing and we have to kind of triumph over this battle. And that metaphor just never made sense to me because like this is something that is deeply kind of sacred. And so if we in birth and the holding space really makes sense because it's like if we're birthing something, the thing has a life energy of its own. The project is just to sort of hold that thing that's kind of coming into being. We're not in full control of it. And by thing, I mean anything. Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a set of poems. But to respect the creative work that like I feel like that's the thing about some of those like structures that don't make sense to me is it's like we're not acknowledging that you're not making all of this happen. Like you're
Right.
collaborating, there's a co-creation here and you're not in full control. So thinking of it like a birth, I'm like, wow, when I birthed my children, I just sort of had to take care and actually surrender to the process.
Yeah. That's a beautiful, not just metaphor, but example of that. Um, so I know I was so excited and curious and taking us in all these tangents. But we were talking about, yeah, what are some of the tools and practices? So you named having projects, project by project as containers for growth. Were there other tools or things that you wanted to talk about?
There's a concept I think that goes with a project that has really helped me. And I think this is also related to like the way the world has changed. And when sort of social media came into play, there all of a sudden became this space where we actually can express our creativity all of the time. And there's something that's both a glorious invitation there and also more pressure, right? Like there's more pressure because now there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
And a trend I started to see totally in myself, because it's always in myself first, like, is that even when I could do something, I was still waiting for some kind of permit. Like I was a dancer first. Like I was always waiting to be told where to stand and where to go. And so even if it was something like build a course, well, I was like, well, but is someone going to tell me like, Liz, you should really build a course, like somebody really wants you to do this, or wait for that kind of nomination. Like someone's like, you should do this. Why are you not writing a book? And I realized how I was giving my power away in that kind of waiting space. And so here's the tool that we just work on all the time in the communities I work with it's the green lighting tool.
Oh, I love that.
And this is just this idea, and I love this metaphor of that kind of green light, that inner permission. This doesn't mean you're not going to partner with big organizations or get your work and, have a Netflix special or get a book deal, anything that you want. But it's saying that the source of permission, that kind of initial yes, does not depend on anybody but you. And can we return to the idea that like I have power over the yes? And really, that's the only, there's only a few things we need to get started. And that yes is sort of one of them. So this idea that like you are in full creative sovereignty here around anything that you want to do. I'm not saying that we don't have to climb a bunch of, mountains in terms of resources and all those other things. But you're not waiting for the person, the organization, the algorithm, the number of followers to give you the legitimacy or to give you the permission to do what you were born to do.
Yeah. You know what? I had a flashback just now, actually, to a coaching session I had with you a bazillion years ago. You asked me a question in that session that has stayed with me, like, and it's been like a guiding light. And I've shared this with clients of mine too. It was a question to help me identify, like, is this a yes or a no for me? And to tap into that inner red light, green light, instead of looking outward for the external one. You said, like, how does, whatever it was we were talking about, how does that feel to you? Is it shackles on or shackles off? And I was like, whoa, that's an invitation for me to ask my body what it feels like. And that is such a source of information.
I love that you brought that up, and I want to attribute that to Martha Beck, who's sort of she that's a metaphor from Martha Beck. So you're thinking about me while you remember it. And let's honor Martha, who's really the OG. Like she's a coaching OG, who's amazing, by the way. If you don't know Martha Beck's work, truly, The Way of Integrity is. She's written so many books, but that book is one of on my top 10 of just like life-changing books. But I love that, and it's sort of, it's rooting to this idea that like you can sense, and similarly, sometimes we're moving toward things that we don't really want to give ourselves the green light for, like that it's actually somebody else's green light.
Often.
And we haven't given ourselves the green light. So that's where I think we want to pair this kind of idea with when we're moving toward a project, the first thing we do is green light it. And that's you give, and also if you're working on a project and we got to go back to greenlight, we'll go back 100 times. We'll just keep greenlighting it until we remember that no relationship, no outside action gets to determine the validity or the idea that this is meant to exist in the world.
And hearing you express that, and I appreciate you sharing with me and the listeners the attribution of those specific words. And I want to say, it's your particular spin on it that I got to receive that I feel so lucky to have with me. And just hearing the way you describe that, it's like, the creative process can only unfold when our body is feeling safe enough to let it unfold, just like the birth process, just like the having sex. Like these are processes that unfold when our body feels safe enough. And how can we possibly feel safe enough when we're attaching to external shoulds or rules or just having like what we should be doing imposed versus checking in with that internal green light? It makes so much sense. Liz, we're coming soon to the final 3 questions part of our conversation, but is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get into yet?
I guess I just want to say, if you've been listening to this and something's kind of coming to you, like I think that something I really respect, and I think this has been a part of my nonlinear journey, is like having enough information to know something is true, but not having the full thing revealed. And so it's why I like really respect fragments, just generally like fragments in the thought process, fragments in the writing process, that you don't have to have that sort of, you don't need to know the beginning, the middle, and the end of a thing to start to trust it. And so I think something that like your this theme of self-trust is so beautiful. And I think that we're sort of, it's almost like 3 kinds of trust that we're really exploring. It's like the trust with ourselves, the trust with creativity, like whatever you think of as source or God or the universe, whatever your word is for it, but that kind of unnameable force. And then the trust of this thing that is coming from you that I personally believe kind of has its own soul and energy, and it's not just you. And so um I think to be engaged in any of those forms of trust, you really don't have to know much. Like it's just sort of about that yes. I think going back to the yes, that we're not waiting for a full, 10 bullet point plan and even a clear why. You don't even need to know the clear why, because the why, like you're saying, Anna, is somatic. It's the why is a kind of, I find the why is usually in the body before there's language. And so often in many of our kind of more public facing spaces, people are like, okay, so, what's the vision and why are you doing it? And this is great. We want to talk about this, but sometimes there's something much kind of more interior about your why that is often not even revealed until later on. So I guess the thing I wanted to say is the trust can just begin with a yes. We don't have to have all our ducks in a row to really engage with this beautiful premise of your podcast of this trust.
Thank you for describing that. And I think it's so, so important. And the thought I kept having as I was listening to you was I was just imagining a world in which everybody waited until they had like the full vision before taking an action. And it was just like the world that I was imagining was just this empty room with white walls, like completely devoid of books and art and businesses and buildings and anything really.
And like, here's what I know for me on the ground of doing this. There's the talking about it, and then there's like the waking up every day and putting it all into practice. I'm better to my kids when I'm nurturing everything we're talking about today. Like I have noticed this link between creative health, which is sort of like the underlying so many of these themes here, the trust, the making space, the courage. It's why I believe this creative relationship really affects all our other relationships. Cause like I am just kinder to my children when I've nourished this thing over here. So I feel like in that room metaphor too, it's like, and everyone's mean to each other.
Yes. And I'll say for the listeners of this podcast, many of whom started following the podcast when it was about chronic pain recovery, like riddled with symptoms, like we feel
Yes.
it physically and in our health when we're not making space for what wants to flow through us. Yeah. Um, okay, this brings us to the final three questions. The first of which, this is kind of my favorite, is what is the soapbox message or a soapbox message that you feel passionate about spreading through all the various work that you do?
It's that your creative voice matters. And it matters more than algorithms, and it matters more than, um, kind of what results you may be getting today. And it matters when you're in that place where, like, you have a body of work and you're kind of like looking to the next chapter and you're like, how do I know if this part matters? Because like I'm known for this, but can I really kind of go over here? And it matters before you have the proof. And it matters even when it feels like we're all, we feel hopeless that we can't do anything kind of in the larger scheme of things as we're all navigating everything. I think that's the message for me is like, can we just respect that this is this most beautiful natural resource that you have, and that I hold as deeply sacred.
Yeah, thank you. That felt very, very true to me. Just, yeah, feels like life, being alive matters. Being alive, not just in the fact that we're breathing, but really being alive. Um, and for the listener that heard you say those words and is feeling like the stirrings of that spark inside themselves, but maybe it's felt risky to follow that spark or even acknowledge its existence for a very, very, very long time. And maybe the thought of even like starting to wake that part of themselves up feels scary, overwhelming, too much. Where do I start? What words of encouragement would you offer that person?
Well, first of all, I want to celebrate you, the person listening, because you're listening to this podcast and you're already in this conversation. So I just think it's like we're always waiting to celebrate until we arrive. But I'm like, let's celebrate right now. The fact that you are here listening to this, the thing that comes to mind for me, there are two things. And the first is so I've, as I said, I've really struggled with such sort of deep feelings of doubt and inner criticism throughout my whole life and career. And one of the things I've started to like at least learn and reframe for myself as I've learned how to work with this is that voice, your word earlier in the conversation, tentacles, it's going to show up when we're in a space of courage, like when we're in that kind of expansive space. So if we can think about it, it doesn't make it any easier. Let me just say that. But if we could reframe its presence as a kind of compass point, as a kind of sign that you have already have the bravery to be engaging in this kind of space of creative courage for you. And then, then we have to work so hard to stop negotiating with that voice and all the things we do. But I think the thing that I wish I had known 20 years ago in sort of all of those dark creative nights of the soul was like, that's coming up because you're trying to expand.
Yes. Thank you for naming that. I think it's where so many of us get tripped up is in thinking that the tentacles mean we're not cut out for it when actually that is the tell that lets us know we are stepping into it.
It swoops right in, right? You start the project and we can start to expect it. Oh, yes, you have arrived because I'm doing something that matters and I'm doing something brave. And to your point, risk.
Yeah.
It's going to show up in the spaces of risk. So let that be a confirmation of your bravery and not a reason to stop you.
I love that so much. Liz, where can people find you and how can they engage with you, if they are wanting to learn more about your work, if they're wanting to work with you, if they're wanting to just connect with your world and what you're doing, what are
This
some of the ways?
conversation is so meaningful to me. So if something happened in Anna's questions and what we were talking about today that sparked something for you, send me a DM at Liz Kimball is my Instagram. I would love to know how this is landing for you. I wanted to say to your point about like when you're kind of at the big, the things are feeling hard and challenging, like this is a team sport. Trusting yourself is a team sport. Bringing forth your creative work, it's a team sport. And so I do want you remember, like I'm here for you. I was born to be your creative champion. Really. I really was. And so I just want you to know that I actually really love supporting your process. And so the other place is lizkimball.com. Join the newsletter. That's really where I'm focused next and where I'm kind of most in contact with people. So yeah, I'd love to find you there.
Yeah, I really encourage folks to reach out and connect. Liz, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for inspiring our listeners. And thank you for just continuing along the path of being you, of allowing yourself to be you in this world. It's really a gift. And I'm so happy to know you.
I'm so happy to know you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you all so much for listening.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.